You're listening to In the Mix, the podcast about the Great British Bake Off, and this week we're back for desserts. My name's Greer and I'm here with JP, as always. Hey JP.
Hello, hello.
Hello. I'm excited because as it's dessert week, it means that 𝗏 is back in the running. She's allowed to speak again after bread week.
She's allowed to have an opinion, is 𝗏.
She is. She's back. And I feel like 𝗏, I think she likes dessert week. It seemed to be her sort of thing, really. Especially with the beginning signature challenge, I associate Pavlova's, which is what they had to make, with quite a, family gathering. Quite sophisticated, after your dinner or a buffet or something. And I feel like 𝗏, she knows what she's talking about when it comes to Pavlova. I feel like it's 𝗏 in dessert form.
Yeah, I feel like it's quite a quintessential British thing. It's I was going to say the Mary Berry of desserts, but obviously we can't say that,
No.
Previous years. But yeah, it's the 𝗏 of desserts. It was nice to see her back in her element this week. And obviously we'll talk about the technical later, but she set the technical as well. So there was a lot less of Paul going around poking things and just slightly more calm and gentle and British.
Exactly. There was not a lot of free time like last week for 𝗏 to, start drinking everyone's brandy or whatever was going into the bakes. Brandy bread? No. Anyway. Yep. So the signature challenge, as I've said, it was a Pavlova. They didn't really give a lot of information about what it had to be. It just had to be a Pavlova of your choice with your flavours. And it was 2 hours and 45 minutes long to create. They did say that it needs to be crispy on the outside and then nice and soft in the middle, and it was the main thing to try and make it not crack. That was what the bakers seemed to be dealing with.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Now, for me, I'm allergic to egg whites, so I can't eat meringue.
Aww.
So when we have Pavlova task or meringue task, I'm sitting there on the sofa going, well, I'm out. I think it's the reason why I can never do Bake Off myself, because I don't know what it's supposed to be like. But it seems to be this really tricky thing. You can't have it too soft. So there was one of them that was very marshmallowy inside. Don't even get us started on mallow. Going back to previous series of In the Mix, just flicked up in my head there. You can obviously get them where they crack too much. So it's all about mixing it the right amount, baking it the right amount. It seems very, very temperamental. Quite tricky.
Yeah, it definitely seemed quite tricky. And someone who did have a bit of a tricky dessert week we're going to start with, because she basically ran the show this week, is 𝗏 too. See, I knew it was like a 𝗏-themed week. Maggie. She started the entire episode off by saying, well, I never eat dessert, which bodes very well. And annoyingly, she did her standard thing again. She was just being too simple. She was like, right, for my Pavlova, it's going to be a very traditional Pavlova. Frozen fruit, summer fruits, raspberry coulis. And I just thought, Maggie, you are not excelling. And unfortunately, it looked already from the beginning like it was going to be her week. Did you think she played it too safe yet again?
Completely. I think every time that Maggie says the word classic or traditional, I just roll my eyes, because you think she'd learn from, I think even the second week, whenever she went for something traditional or classic, she was just getting it wrong. And the judges have said to her a few times now, if you play it too simple, then you've got nowhere to hide. And every time she's done that, she's not executed it well enough. When she started this week saying that, I thought, she still hasn't learned again to mix up a little bit. And I think it goes back to that discussion we've had before of when they decide what bakes they're going to have, when they're going to discuss what they're going to do they do the whole series before the series? Because otherwise, surely, if they're doing it week on week, she would turn around and go, well, maybe I'll change it up this week so that it's not so obvious. I'm going to go with a Crackerland Pavlova, so if it's got cracks all over it, it's fine. She doesn't think of mixing up at all. She's like, I'll do it traditional and do it well, and then never does it well.
Exactly. It can't just be that thing. I mean, I don't want to say, but I am, that is it because she's an older lady? Is it because she's, a bit fearful of trying new things or new flavours? That seems really stereotypical. So I don't want it to be that. As you say, I hope it is that she's just thought, these are my strengths. I'm going to play to them, the traditional stuff that I know and love and I've been making for years. And then maybe she's been forced to stick with it. But she did say in her a little bit to camera, she said, there's no real need to enhance things. She said that to Paul and 𝗏, and they both looked to her like, really? This has been your problem and we've told you about it for like the last 3 weeks. Ever since Brandy Snaps, I think, when she went traditional. It's just been not her thing.
Yeah, this is the Bake Off, Maggie. You do this once in your life, and the reason that you're on the Bake Off is obviously to prove that you can bake, hopefully, but also to be a bit out there and produce something that's going to get us all talking on social media and going to have, you know, people wherever they are chatting about what they're making. Not, I'm going to make a traditional pavlova and make a sort of half-assed effort.
Exactly. I couldn't believe it when they said frozen fruit, because other people, they'd been really like pushing the boat out. You know, they want to show the flavour combinations that they could do. You know, they wanted to show all the different techniques. People were trying to make it look really nice. We had Freya with her meringue piped in different colours. We even had George. He was trying his best to add some yellow to his. But no, you had Maggie going, frozen fruit. That's what we'll use.
I know, and it's that tricky thing as well, because, you know, I'm just sort of thinking in my head, I'm really sounding quite negative about Maggie. But the reason I'm sounding negative about her is because I really like Maggie. And I'm like, come on, I want you to do well here. And, yeah, it's always frustrating when, obviously, it's easy for us as armchair bakers to be looking at this and going, listen to the advice. But, yeah, it's just a shame she didn't really for this one.
No, I know. I think... in contrast to Maggie, though, we had somebody this week who was really going over the top and working doubly hard than everyone else to try and make their bakes work in dessert week. And that's Freya, because she's sticking to her guns to stay vegan, to stay using the Aquafaba stuff, and to not use anything other than in the technical challenge where she might have to, that isn't vegan. But it caused quite a lot of problems this week, especially with the pavlova. She was sort of saying that the meringue she was making was less stable than everyone else's.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting one. And again, as we've gone through the series, and as Paul said at one point, we're over a third of the way through now. It's really interesting that Freya is sticking with those ingredients, but I really like the fact she's doing that. She's sticking to the vegan theme. Aquafaba is something obviously we've heard about on Bake Off before. They've used it in Vegan Week in the past, and it's quite a new no, it's not a new thing, but it's something that's up and coming, and a lot of people are starting to use Aquafaba at home. I've got to admit, with some of the recipes we cook at home, I had some Aquafaba left recently when we used chickpeas in a recipe, and I thought, no, do you know what, I'm just going to sit there and whisk it up with some sugar and see what it does. And it's quite fun to have a go with it. And say for me, being allergic to egg white, I can't eat meringue unless it's made with Aquafaba. But she stuck to her guns with this one. What was interesting is the fact she almost sort of gave that disclaimer at the beginning of, you know, I'm going to make an Aquafaba meringue, disclaimer, it's not going to work. You know, just ignore some of the elements. But she gave it a go, and I think, unfortunately, she didn't manage to pull it out the bag with flavours. I think with the meringue, you know, if you're making a pavlova and you're making an Aquafaba meringue, then as long as your flavours are okay, if the meringue doesn't quite go well, or the texture's not quite there, you can still redeem yourself. But it was a shame, because when it came to it, she made a 𝗵𝗂𝗍𝗶 pavlova, which looked quite nice, though it was messy with the sort of cracks and everything from the Aquafaba, but she didn't quite get the flavours either. And I think that's the thing that's going to be tricky for her, because if she can't quite execute it well with the vegan ingredients she's using, she's got to deliver on that flavour still. Yeah,
exactly. I think you're right. You know, Freya's got to do everything, you know, amazing, because as you say, there was a bit of a disclaimer at the beginning. Oh, well, it's going to be a vegan style, so it's not going to be as good anyway. But, you know, I've got to make sure that everything else that I put into it is good. And her flavour combination, as you say, peaches and raspberry, that's really good. I can feel how that's meant to taste already on my tongue. It sounds tangy and amazing. Yeah. But Paul was like, yeah, he didn't really taste it very well, which isn't what you want. And when they cut into her pavlova, you could see it sort of a bit crispy on the outside, but where she had put, you know, the fruit and the coulis in the middle, it was just a bit mushy. I mean, it was just a bit sloppy, I think was the word that they used. So, yeah, I was wondering, is she going to completely stick to her guns with the veganism and adapting each bake? Or will she go, you know what, I'm actually a really, really good baker and these ingredients are sort of letting me down? And I don't know, will she switch at some point? I don't know if she can now. She is the posting vegan person on the Bake Off, so she might just go out one week because her ingredients let her down, not her skill.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's going to be interesting as well later on if we start going into sort of pork pie realm like we've had in the past, and if we have meat pies and things like that, particularly if it's for a technical, she's going to be a huge disadvantage for that. So I don't know if she wants to stay in the competition. You're right. I think she's got to sort of keep the vegan element going. She, you know, obviously she's very committed to that. But yeah, maybe she might throw that curveball in if she gets a lot further and she knows it's not going to go well. I don't know.
Exactly. And someone else who has their work cut out, I think, to convince Prue and Paul that they can do style as well as the flavours is George. And he is trying to get better every week. Last week with his koala bread, I mean, I thought that was excellent. But now he's back to being a little bit messy with his pavlova. So he was trying to make a yellow patterned speculoos biscuit with lemon curd and biscuit cream. Now, speculoos or speculous or whatever is basically Biscoff, isn't it? We call it Biscoff. Yeah. They weren't going to advertise with Biscoff. They're not like Serene.
They're not going to sell their soul to the Biscoff company for it.
No.
I just love the fact biscuit cream is the new sandwich jammy biscuit. I was like, that's this week's avoidance of brand name.
Exactly, it is. But I quite like the technique. He did throw a bit of a curveball in with the idea of doing biscuits as well as the pavlova. So there was a moment when it was really critical for everyone to have their pavlova in for about an hour or something, their meringue. And they then had to sort of tease that oven door open so it didn't all crack and go flat or whatever. And it had to be completely cooled, you know, in a slow transition. And people were putting like syringes and spoons and stuff in the slot of the oven door. But George, he was like, but I need to use the oven to make biscuits. So he just opened the door, got out his pavlova and stuck it in a drawer. I mean, was that ever going to work?
I know. I there was a moment because I sort of lost what was happening, and then it was like, oh, it's in the proving drawer. What the hell is he doing? Yeah, it took me a second watch to realise that he was baking biscuits at the same time, and that's why. But I did love in his feedback from Paul. Paul was like, yeah, that was never going to work.
It was so funny, the idea that he could take it out of the really hot oven, but all that heat was going to get retained in the meringue and then put in the drawer, and it was going to do the same thing. It was a good idea. I wonder if he'd practiced it in the tent, or whether he was too interested in the DVDs, because obviously that's a big thing in there. But it didn't work. And what was so funny is he described it as very 𝗁𝗃, which I liked. And Prue, I mean, I think she called one of his bakes Splendid the other week, and he was really fixated with this. And I bet he's going to be fixated with this even more, because she said, George, I think it looks awful.
I know, it was brutal. I was like, Prue is very much back this week.
Yeah.
She just, no holds barred, literally. The shot of George's bake, then his face, then Prue going, this looks awful. I was like, ow.
So funny. I love it when Prue gets savage. It's great.
Yeah, me too.
There was another line said by Paul saying that someone else is back in the tent this week, and that's Jürgen, because last week he didn't do very well in the really Italian-themed bread week. He had some sort of odd creations, 𝗦𝗽𝗶𝗍, not like that. We didn't see that. We thought, okay, Jürgen's lost his spark. He looked really sad last week in bread week. But Paul said with his pavlova, which was an interesting pavlova, that he was back and back in the game. What did you think of Jürgen's pavlova?
I liked the idea of it. I thought Passover Pavlova, which is such a mouthful to say.
Tongue twister.
Yeah, it was a nice... It's like, bleh. It was a great combination, great idea. I was a little bit confused when the sort of... They showed the bake for the first time. We had these matzah triangles coming off the top. I was like, matzah on top of a pavlova? Slightly strange. But yeah, I thought it was a great theme. And it was nice. It was good to see him smiling again, and Paul going for the fact that Jürgen was back, which was nice.
Yeah, exactly. He'd got through bread week. I think he was quite happy to be back, being able to make something sweet. I just thought it was a really random idea. I guess it wasn't random for him, I guess, to create sort of a Passover cake, because he said that his wife is Jewish and they've started celebrating the Jewish festivals. So I guess it was something that he was, very used to doing. But for everyone else that was sort of doing their themes of, I'm going to use peaches. There are quite a few peaches and raspberries and things. Jürgen, like the 𝗂𝗶𝗁 and the baby last week, he just throws just a curveball in. Everything he does is just really quite eccentric and not like anybody else's, which is great, makes great TV, but is also very amusing. But he wasn't the only one to do sort of a religious-themed pavlova. I'm not sure how religious Lizzie's was going to be, but it was associated with Easter. When you think of Easter, do you also think of baby lambs, like Lizzie said? Would that have been your first thought when thinking of an Easter bake? Because it wouldn't have been mine.
No. Well, this is the funny thing with her, because I loved how Paul was sort of trying to keep up with her thought process, because she was like, okay, Easter bake, Easter, I think lamb. And then Paul was like, so you're going to do a lamb pavlova?
I know.
And it's like, you need to connect the dots a little bit more there for me. Then she went with rosemary, which I thought, okay, fair enough. But rosemary's not really an Easter flavour. It's just something that goes with lamb. It was like Lizzie had done drunk word association and come up with a sort of final bake, which for me looked more like Halloween with the really sort of garish green colour and everything. But that being said, I love Lizzie for the fact that she is just a little bit zany with her ideas. She's crazy out there, and she brings a lot of personality to her bake. So I love that bit of every episode and every bake where we go, right, what's Lizzie going to do?
I know.
Going, what on earth is she going to come out with? I think Jürgen and her did the FA Cup draw style when they come up with the bakes. They did that for what bakes they were going to make, I think, this time. Passover Pavlova. It was brilliant from Lizzie. And actually, she did all right. It was a bit stodgy, but they quite liked the flavours that she came out with, which was I think more surprising. I'm glad she didn't put lamb in it.
Exactly, me too. I think the first thing I'd think of if I was creating some sort of Easter-themed dessert, chocolate. Come on, Easter eggs. That's what you would have done. Hot cross buns, anything like that. But no, I do agree. Lamb. Now I am going to make sure that we all look out for what is Lizzie going to say next, That is going to be a feature that we're going to have to do, because you're right, she brings so much personality. She's hilarious. I'm enjoying her bakes because she is getting through and she's doing quite all right, really. But she is very, very funny at the same time. So I'm glad that she's still in. But for me, rosemary, putting that in your bake, I mean, that's one thing. So it was like an infused cream, I guess. I'm just going to have a look and see what she did. Oh, yeah, rosemary creme diplomat, which we've discussed before, me and you, creme diplomats.
Lovely.
Her whole pavlova was purple anyway. The rosemary creme diplomat with blueberry and a lemon curd. So there were lots of colours. And you're right, it did look a bit like Halloween. You'd have thought, okay, you could probably do kind of a nice infusion of rosemary, maybe a little bit if you had to. It could have been one of those elegant flavourings, something like Giuseppe would have done. But Lizzie then completely made it her own by putting, I am assuming, because I cannot remember, food colouring into her creme diplomat, and it came out like a Halloween green. It's like what Cadbury's do with their scare cream eggs or whatever they're called. It's that bright green stuff that you think, children are going to be eating sweets like that when they've done trick-or-treating. So it was purple and green. Odd. I mean, and she described,
somebody think of the E numbers in this?
I know. She described it looking like a swamp creature, which I loved. Yeah. Do you think she was getting at Shrek? Do you think the first take she was like, it looks like Shrek? And the guy was like, sorry, we haven't been able to say Biscoff. You're definitely not allowed to say Shrek, so come up with something else.
I've got it. That is the DVD she was watching in the practice tent.
That's was this week's DVD. That's what George was distracted by as well. Shrek. I bet it is.
Right, let's tweet her. Let's find out.
Let's move on to the technical challenge now, because Lizzie said at the beginning that pavlova really didn't seem like a dessert for her, and instead, dessert for her was something like a sticky toffee pudding, and she preempted it. She guessed what the technical was going to be. So Prue wanted them to make 4 sticky toffee puddings with, as Noel said, a sticky toffee sauce. We've begun to understand what that meant, with tuile triangles and creme anglaise. So my boyfriend, when he was watching this, because he loves sticky toffee pudding, was like, why do they have to have it with something fancy? Why can't they just have it with cream or ice cream? And I was like, yes, but creme anglaise, what do you think that is?
It's like a runny custard.
Yes. English cream.
But why did they think about the tuile? And I've got to admit, I agree with your boyfriend on that one. I was sitting there and I was thinking, let's just make a nice sticky toffee pudding with the sauce and the creme anglaise. Fair enough. But why do we have to stick some sort of sesame seed tuile on top? It was very, very strange.
It was really weird. The tuile looked like something that you'd buy at the garden centre to put out on the bird table.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so
I was like, I'm pretty sure I've bought this for my nan before. very odd. But yeah, I have no idea why they had to do the tweel. It didn't add anything, did it?
No, and again, it's that thing of when you saw them all on the gingham altar at the end, after seeing the example ones, which I still want to know if Paul and Prue make them or if they've got some sort of food team out the back who make them, which I'm sure is really what happens. But theirs was sort of beautifully standing up and, you know, symmetrical and everything. And then you go to the gingham altar, and whenever you get anything like twheels or things like that, you have 9 different ways of setting them out. Some are laying them down. I mean, Maggie had no other choice. You've got some that look brilliant. I mean, Chigs who got handshake as well, we should say, for the signature for his Pavlova.
Yes.
He did very, very well. His looked very good and was standing up the right way. But other ones we had crossed over, laying over, drunk to one side, you know. But we didn't need it on a sticky toffee pudding. What's that all about?
I don't know. I feel like it's, you know, if you go to a restaurant and you've had your massive meal and you want a little dessert, you're like, right, sticky toffee pudding, it's the best. You want it to be nice and saucy. You want your custard or your ice cream or whatever to go with it. You don't think tweel. And if it comes with a tweel, it's like having a wafer in ice cream or anything. You will leave it.
Yeah.
Or I would leave it. So it didn't add anything, and you're right, I like how everyone placed it differently. I don't know why, anyway, that Prue wanted them to display it like a pyramid thing. Yeah. I don't get it. Why? Made no sense. And then the sticky toffee puddings, I thought they'd be bigger. They look like bite-sized sticky toffee puddings, to be honest. And then the fact that the whole presentation was weird. It was just on a long tray, 4 little sticky toffee puddings with the tweels. We don't know what they are. And then you had just 2 jugs, one with the sauce in and one with the creme anglaise. And it's like, okay, this is some sort of deconstructed technical challenge. It was just weird. But I think the tweels kind of went all right for people. I think Amanda sort of forgot to cut hers while it was still warm. So hers was sort of breaking off a bit. And even Maggie, who had a shocking nightmare when it came to the sticky toffee pudding itself, they said her tweels were okay. So I guess they didn't really have that much skill involved in those. So why did we need to make them in the first place?
I know.
Having said that, Freya did have a little tiny bit of a disaster with the tweel when she dropped the actual sort of sheet that she was making onto the floor and then asked, do you think it'll be all right if I still use it?
Oh, yeah. But do you know what? A little secret for you here. Any kitchen or cooking show that you see on TV, they are always filthy. So I went and watched a cooking show years ago being filmed. I was sat in the audience, and I remember when they were cooking, it was one of these shows where I don't want to name and shame, but
you just do like the biscuit
where,
cream style name and shame. You know, the Bake Off don't use the actual term.
It was a BBC cooking show where they had red tomatoes and green peppers.
Oh, I love that one.
And I went and watched that being filmed, and it's hilarious because at the time the audience was sat behind the kitchen, so it looks, you know, really shiny set from the front, and then you look behind it and literally you've got, like, you know, wooden kitchens that you see all this MDF. You got plug sockets that are hanging off the back of the unit. You've got a gas bottle, a sink that literally goes to a bucket underneath. And I remember someone in the audience asking, did the audience not get to try the food, or the crew or anybody like that? And they were literally, for that show, they used to make the food, the judges or a host, I can't remember who it was now, used to try the food, and then literally it used to go in the bin because the kitchens weren't that clean. It's a TV studio, like nobody goes around and cleans them between. It's filthy. So I imagine the Bake Off tent is similar to that in the fact that they will have people doing the washing up and stuff like that, but I wouldn't have served something off the carpeted floor of the Bake Off tent. I mean, no. What are you doing?
You'd have all the people running around, you know, doing all the errands, trying to get, you know, this thing to that person. You'd have had lots of feet going over that. So, but to be honest, I probably wouldn't have made my tweel again because it's only a tweel. If it was the sticky toffee pudding, you'd have thought, I probably need to do that again. But it kind of landed like half on the floor and then half not. So I think she kind of got away with it. And you're right, I couldn't be bothered to do it again. No. So I'd have just gone with it. No.
I'd have just cut that bit off and then been like, I'll put the rest of it in the oven.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Maggie, we need to talk about Maggie because she is having a disaster, and I laughed so hard when she flipped out her sticky toffee pudding and put it on the tray. It it was a moment that is going to go down in Bake Off history, I believe, because it was very, very funny. And she was sort of all right going through. I know they don't get very many instructions, but she was adamant that she had done everything, hadn't missed anything out. But come on, as a baker, she should know that to make a sponge, sticky toffee pudding is a sponge. You're going to need a flour in it. You just are. Yeah. But the thing that she did was read the instructions, and then on the other side, there was just one bullet point left saying add the flour, and she didn't read that bit.
Now, so there's a couple of things here. First of all, as we've said about her for the last couple of weeks, she is one of the older bakers in the tent. And so you're right. Surely she must know that sticky toffee pudding, as a cakey pudding, is going to have flour in. And she did turn around at one point and said, when she was putting the butter and sugar in the mixer, she was like, I haven't put the flour in at this point, which is a bit weird. So I'm going to read the recipe again. And obviously she read it again, but it didn't occur to her. And then the other thing I thought about, I didn't think about it yesterday when I watched it, but I thought about it when I watched it again this morning, is the fact that during the bake, Noel comes over and adds some extra steps to her thing about pushing Paul in a ditch and this, that and the other. So I'm guessing that the flour instruction was step whatever on that bit of paper instead of that. So I'm wondering if when he's done that, Maggie's sort of gone, I don't need that bit of paper now, Noel's written all over it, or don't know why it was here, and that's where she's missed the instruction, because I don't know, it's really strange. I was confused by that, but it's the old adage that as a former teacher we tell our children to read every side of paper front and back in a test. Now, come on, Maggie.
I know, always read the question, right?
Always read the question, and there's always going to be flour in a bloody sticky toffee pudding.
I know. Oh, Maggie, maybe she was in a bit of a flap because of the signature Pavlova didn't go too well for her. Maybe she was like, I really need to do well. But yeah, maybe you're right about Noel slightly sabotaging it, distracting her. But the bottom instruction, it couldn't have... I mean, it didn't say at the bottom and then put in the oven, did it? Like on that first page, she got to it and it was probably like, add this, add that. And then it didn't say, and put in oven. You could have gone on to the next page and saw add flour, So she kind of just whacked it in the oven before its time, I think. I don't know. Maybe she was just really distracted.
Yeah, they always put bake on as an instruction. So... obviously the flour would have come in before then. Yeah. Bake and then mix in the flour.
Unless it was one of those things I was thinking that maybe it had on one side in a column all the ingredients, and then the other side it was the column for the methodology, and then you kind of turned it over and it just had one bullet point on the left as flour, so it was kind of like hidden, but it had said add the ingredients or something in the actual method. And then it had bake because it just assumed that you'd read the whole list, even though it had flour, just one bullet point on the last page. That's all I can think. That actually, I'm trying to save Maggie here because how on earth do you forget the flour? I really thought about it. If I think about the typesetting and the layout of the instructions, I'm really trying to save Maggie and make her feel better.
I'm thinking there was and this is so sad of me for remembering this, but there was a close-up of the recipe because they had my favourite moment, which they always do, of in the big bold red font at the top, do not confer with the other bakers.
Yes.
And I saw that again on this episode, so maybe I might pop back and see if I can see that missing instruction and circle it and tweet it to Maggie, going, there it is.
Please do. That would be so good. You need to have a look at that for us so we can see whether Maggie was just having a nightmare and not reading properly, or if we feel actually sorry for her. We need to know. But then it was that brilliant moment when she turned out her sticky toffee pudding onto the plate. And I'm sorry, but it looked like something that you are told to watch out for as a symptom on the NHS website. That's how I thought I could describe it. I also thought it looked like caramelised onion chutney, like Paul Hollywood said.
Yeah, and the twirls looked like seeded cracker breads for that one. So I was like, this is perfect. Crackers and
works
chutney.
Out well.
Christmas.
I know. Yeah. So, probably didn't taste very good.
No.
I don't remember if her her sticky toffee sauce actually was any good, or a creme anglaise, because I was too distracted by looking at the lump of coal that was presented on a plate.
I don't think they even tried them in the end. I've just got here, no flour, great twirls. That's
Brilliant.
all I've got.
I love it. But she wasn't the only one to actually mess up the sticky toffee pudding. Some people's were raw as well, and their sticky toffee sauce wasn't very good. So, saying that sticky toffee pudding is the quintessential dessert at the beginning, it didn't really go well for people.
No, it's an interesting one. We, my girlfriend and I like making sticky toffee pudding. We make a big one instead of little individual ones.
Nice.
And it's tricky because you can't tell when they're cooked because of the colour. And Prue sort of said that last night. Obviously, if you're baking, you look for golden brown or whatever. But with sticky toffee, it's already dark brown anyway because of the ingredients. But you use the age-old thing of stick a skewer in it, and if it comes out clean, then it's baked. And none of them did that yesterday. They sort of, were mind reading. They were opening up the thing, sort of putting a mould to their forehead and going, yes, it's baked, and then taking it out. It literally was like, it was just the strangest. Everyone's going, yes. And the best thing that we always get, if one person takes it out and then everyone else is like, take out your bakes. And then you get one who's like, I'm going to leave it to the last moment, which I think was Maggie, despite the fact she was literally just burning sugar.
I wonder if she could smell it through the oven. You would have thought that she would know that it was wrong. I know you're not allowed to confer, but other people would have been like, Maggie, is something burning? But it didn't happen. And then Giuseppe is one of the people that you can tell everyone in the tent thinks is like cert to be in the final. Him and Jürgen, everyone knows that they're very, very good. Oh, yeah. And to have Giuseppe as the one to be like, did you not add your flour? Look, there it is on the instructions. That must have been so awkward.
To be like, come on, Uncle Giuseppe. Although his was one of the ones that was underbaked, and there was a slight moment with him, because this is where Paul did go back to being king of bread, because they were opening up the puddings and he was sort of sticking his finger in there going, this one's raw.
Lovely.
I can't do his Liverpudlian accent. But it was interesting because with Giuseppe, he sort of poked it, he was like, it's quite underbaked. And Giuseppe was a bit like, he was almost a bit offended by that. It was like,
yeah, he broke composure a little bit. You could see, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, but there was some really bad. I mean, Christelle, brilliant in the pavlova, not great with the pudding. That was the first one that was quite raw. Freya's one was very raw inside, and her creme anglaise was quite curdled as well. And Amanda with her scrambled egg creme anglaise.
Exactly. I mean, I just didn't really get how people couldn't have mastered the sticky toffee pudding, because, well, you've just said you make it regularly, and I thought it would be quite an easy sort of task to do. I know this is me, as you say, armchair baker, but I thought it would be quite an easy thing to do. But instead, we had a few that were raw. It didn't help Giuseppe that Jürgen was back top in the technical challenge. He was given first place. And obviously last place had to be Maggie, because, I mean, you couldn't eat that at all. You couldn't even try it. She'd forgot the most vital ingredient, and it went pretty badly. So Jürgen, he's climbing back up there. He's doing all right. But Maggie, she wasn't having her week. And I thought after that, she was certainly going to leave. She was definitely going to be the one to go. I don't even feel like whatever she did in the showstopper, she could have saved herself.
Yeah, she was so far behind the others, and it was that moment of, at the end of that one, everyone's going, yeah, it's going to be Maggie, isn't it? Prue's got her wish. Prue too is going to be leaving the tent. And there wasn't really anyone close. I know, it was Prue's wish,
unfortunately.
It was so sad.
I know.
But yeah, Freya wasn't doing the best until that point. But Maggie was so far below Freya, it was unreal.
Let's move on to the Showstopper Challenge now. It wasn't really one of my favourites, to be honest. I have preferred some of the 3D biscuit scenes, from your childhood toy and everything. It was a bit more fun. But this, I feel like you needed a thesaurus, or a dictionary rather, to work out what on earth they are baking. If you're not a baker, especially for kind of fancier bakes, you're not really going to know what they were talking about in this. They had to make, I'm even going to butcher how you say it, a Joconde _𝗏. I think.
Lovely.
That's very English, that was.
We'll go with that. It was one of those bakes where we're chucking around words like Joconde and 𝗏𝗏𝗏. Yeah. And it's like, calm yourself, guys.
I know. I feel like there needed just to be a little bit more of an explanation when Noel said it at the beginning. I think people understood what it was. So you sort of said it was I wrote it down with some of the words to try and make it a bit easier. A celebratory multi-layered dessert with a highly decorative Joconde collar. And it was that Joconde collar that everyone was sort of fixated on because that seemed to be like the technical bit, really. It was just sort of Joconde they described as an almond sponge, and it was quite a flat sponge, and it's French, I imagine. And they had to sort of pipe on a design of their choosing. It could be, it literally was just open, wasn't it? It could be anything this week, because I didn't write down an actual theme. I guess you can compare them if it was a theme, whereas some people kept it quite sort of, normal, had, strawberries piped on it or something related to what their Joconde sponge dessert was going to be. But others went quite mad with their ideas. And so I don't know if any of the bakers, it's not really something that as a baker, like a home baker, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to make a Joconde 𝗔𝗶𝗃 now. But unsurprisingly, Jürgen did say he had already made one of those before, and it was a Star Trek themed wedding cake where 2 Starship Enterprises were kissing on it. What? Who are Jürgen's friends?
I mean, I don't know, but I want to meet them in the wonderful world of Jürgen. It's a weird one, though, because the Joconde, we've had sponges like this before. I mean, we've had, a few years ago, we had Swiss rolls that had this sort of pipe design on, and then they'd done that. So the idea of piping on something onto the sponge, we have had before. And a few times. So I mean, if I was going on Bake Off, then it's probably something I'd practice beforehand, because I feel it's something they've done a few times over the years and will probably come up because they're going to run out eventually of things to do. But as you say, it was just so eclectic. You had themed ones like Lizzie's one with her Liverpool skyline, and then you had other ones like Freya's one, which was vegan, and again came with a disclaimer of it may not be very good because it's vegan, and she sort of just did a design on, and then you had Chigs's Black Forest one, which was themed around a relative's bathroom tiles. It was so broad, but that really opened up for people to impress.
That's true. I think it did. I think that it was a bit of a design challenge, and I guess maybe it's not necessarily something that I would eat because I'm not really a jelly fan, and a lot of the things that they were creating was quite jelly-like. And it was sort of jelly, 𝗵𝗲𝗄, 𝗂𝗁𝗃, and then obviously the Joconde. So it was just lots of different flavours, but it wasn't anything that I was like, oh yes, I would like to try that, Jürgen, he went with a sort of wacky theme. Unfortunately, he didn't stick with the Star Trek. He could have just not said and then recreated the same thing. He went with a Henry VIII cake. And now what I liked about it at the beginning is that the voiceover said that it wasn't just going to be sort of correct baking wise. He was going to actually pipe round the side of his Joconde collar actual music notes to the tune of a song or a piece of music that was composed by Henry VIII for Catherine of Aragon. It was the actual music notes.
I know.
And he was singing it like dun, 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 as it was going round to just check that he'd got it right. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the composition. I'm not so up on my Tudor compositions like Jürgen, but yeah, I mean, that man, he is like an encyclopedia for very random stuff.
He is. Do you know what? I loved that, and I thought that was such a Jürgen thing to do, wasn't it? Really, and I mean, I live just down the road from Hampton Court Palace, Henry VIII's palace. So I was like, this is great. Love a bit of the Tudors.
It's local to me.
it's wonderful. But I think my favourite bit about the whole thing with Jürgen's one, when they when he presented it at the end and they spoke about the bubbles in his white wine jelly. First of all, he's made a white wine jelly. I mean, I'm not gonna complain about the bubbles. Let's drink. But it was the thing about the black pepper, and it was weird because when he was talking about his mint and black pepper layers, I was like, that's going to be disgusting. But 𝗵𝗄 couldn't get the black pepper, and he said, oh yeah, it's a real slow burner and it will come through in a moment. And Paul told him, can you sing for us while we wait? And he sung the composition around the outside. And literally I was like, oh my God, oh, bless him. And then Paul at the end going, oh, there's the black pepper. There we go.
I know. I'm glad he did that, because I was watching and I didn't put 2 and 2 together that he was actually singing the composition. I thought it was just a Paul mocking the slightly nerdy kid at school, being like, oh, well, we will wait for your black pepper then if you say it's a slow burner. Sing the entire top 40 and then we'll see it. It seemed really like it's just an odd thing to do, but now it makes a lot more sense. Paul just wasn't being rude, being like, oh, well, we'll wait a long time. Do you want to sing for us? Instead, he did actually sort of, it was to do with the bake. Okay, I take it back. I like Paul a bit more now. I thought he was just being rude to poor Jürgen, and anyone, it seems, that's rude to Jürgen is going to get shouted at by the entirety of Twitter because everybody loves him.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Everybody.
I know.
Everybody loves Jürgen.
Exactly. So, yeah, Jürgen's flavour combinations, the mint and black pepper, the strawberries, white chocolate bavarois, I mean, mad. But he wasn't the only person to do sort of quite mad flavours this time. Everyone seemed to do really quite weird stuff. So we had, let's have a look, Freya. Let's do Freya because she obviously had to make it vegan again, and so she didn't want to use gelatin, so it was lots of Aquafaba again in her Swiss meringue. And something that she said is because everyone was making a round Joconde collar, but because the Joconde, making it vegan, wasn't very bendy or very stretchy, she had to do it like rectangles. And for me, we've talked a lot about following the brief. You know, was that following the brief? I know that she wants to make it vegan, but it wasn't a collar, was it? She just made a sort of rectangular cake. So that was a bit strange. And I'm not a fan of jelly. She did chocolate orange, hazelnut and an orange jelly. So I just don't think any of these are for me. What did you think about Freya's sort of following the brief, but then at the same time being okay because it's vegan?
Yeah, I was sort of torn on this one because when I first heard about it, I thought the same, and you know, I've been a real stickler for the brief this year.
You have.
I thought she, you know, again, she's not following the brief, and she'd piped onto the base of the Joconde so that she had the pattern on there. It didn't quite work, but you know, she did that side of things. And then when she sort of explained that she was doing it because it didn't bend, I thought, do you know what, she's being quite clever with it, and I sort of thought, you know what, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. She knows the limitation of the bake. She's not going to do something that she knows isn't going to work. Whereas the other people who haven't followed the brief, I think, have just completely missed it and not even listened to the brief. I think she has, but realised the limitation of her ingredients. Having said that, it didn't look very neat, and I think when you're going to do, I mean, in itself it was weird because loads of them made the collars which had these lines down where they did them in bits, and some of them were in weird places. But for Freya's one, it was quite messy. It didn't look great. But yeah, I suppose I was slightly more lenient on the brief for her because she thought about it. It was a good enough reason. It wasn't just like, oh well, you know, I'm just going to ignore the brief. She sort of realised the limitations in her ingredients, I suppose.
Exactly. I think, you know, trying to make these Joconde 𝗵𝗲 desserts look good and actually keep the filling in was something quite difficult this week, because we had a few people whose kind of burst open at the seams. Amanda was one. She was doing another biblical. It's a very biblical week. Maybe they had a religious sort of Passion of the Christ film after Shrek in a double billing in the practice tent, because yeah, it was another sort of Christian theme, and she was doing Adam's Temptation with caramelized apple jelly and a Calvados bavarois, and she then described it when it came up as like a crime scene that she had visited, because it had just burst open in the fridge and you had all of this red coming out everywhere. But I thought her design on the outside of sort of the snake going around like the apple tree was quite a good design. So it was a bit disappointing that it had splurged out. And then who else? Let's have a look. Lizzie, as you said, she did quite a good design with the Liverpool skyline. She had hazelnut chocolate sponge, pecans, dark chocolate and moonshine ganache, which made me laugh when that came up. And the fact that she presented it with a bin as well was excellent.
I loved that. And it's the way she just sort of gave it to Paul at the end of the judging. It's like, this is for you. Goodbye. Thank you.
I bought you a bin.
To remind you of home.
Yeah, brilliant. And then some other excellent flavours. Christelle did her coconut rum, almond and pineapple Joconde with lime jelly and coconut bavarois too. but let's talk about him, because he has been quite consistent, and it's quite good because he is a lockdown baker, so he's sort of relatively new to baking, but he really pulled it out the bag for this showstopper, is Chigs. He did a Black Forest Gâteau Joconde.
Yeah, I really liked the idea of his, and it made me laugh the fact that he modelled the design around his sister's bathroom tiles or whatever it was.
I know.
But he had done so well in this episode. Like his tropical pavlova at the beginning was good. He came third in the technical. And I don't know, after 2 weeks of Jürgen getting Star Baker and then Giuseppe getting it last week, when it came to the showstopper, there was almost this glimpse of like, somebody else might get it. Somebody, we all thought that it was going to be between Jürgen and Giuseppe every single week. And Jürgen was having a strong one as well this week. And it was like, maybe someone else could get a Star Baker, particularly as he'd had his handshake in the first round. So, it was really nice. And actually, I think that Chigs is someone who, I don't know, I think more and more people are going to fight for him as we go on through the series. But it was a great bake from him. And it goes to prove that, as they said a few weeks ago with Sophie Faldo, who had only just really started baking when she won a few years back, that it can be done.
It can. I think you're when you're fixating on your new sort of obsession, it probably helps actually if, it's you've just stuck into baking and now you're on Bake Off because you're excited and you want to keep learning new things and you get better and better and better and it's really fun. Whereas maybe for some people like Maggie, she knows that she can bake, but she doesn't have that like thrill with it anymore. She doesn't want to enhance it, in her words. She's just like, oh yeah, this worked, I could make that. Whereas Chigs is like, oh, I want to get better and better, I want to see what this tastes like with this, and I want to try that new technique. And he's just growing and growing, and he was quite slow and steady really this week. I know he had the handshake at the beginning, but he didn't, I think, want to get sort of carried away. He was doing well, and he was like, oh, he did say, I think I might be in for Star Baker. You might be there, but he didn't want to just say it and jinx it. It kind of felt like, oh, okay, it might be my turn now. And you're right, it was so funny when he said that his design was because of his sister's new bathroom tiles. Hilarious. Yeah. Especially when we compare that to Jürgen, who's just doing a Henry VIII composition. Two very different minds, but both equally great. So I thought that was so funny. I think we need to talk about Maggie again. I know this is a Maggie-heavy episode, but she did completely just fall apart everywhere. And you had Chigs and his wonderful design with the Star Baker, and then we had Maggie, who... There was a scene when she took her Joconde out the oven and then it was too soft, it wasn't cooked, and there was just handfuls of cake being, grasped and then chucked in the bin. She was just like ripping it up like it was tile off the floor. It did just look horrendous.
See, my thought there, and I mean, bakers of the world who listen to our podcast, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just sat there at that point and I thought, why on earth didn't she just put it back in the oven for a few more minutes?
Yeah, I have no idea. I think she was just, I don't know, in a flap. That's all I can think. She was going, oh God, panic. Yeah. Because, or maybe there is just, it goes odd or something if you take it out and it cools and you put it back in. I don't know. Odd is the technical term. Can you tell?
Odd is the technical one.
It goes odd.
But I also love the moment where at the end of the bake, once she put everything in and it had gone into the freezer to set, and she was like, I'm just going to hold it right up until the last second. And then as soon as they were like, right, that's it, bakers, she let go and it just oozed. And it just made its way out. And I was like, oh, there was just... I know,
so she was another one that it completely like splurged everywhere. The ooze across the bench. I love it. She was also trying to do a skyline, wasn't she? Very different from Liverpool. She was trying to do a Paris skyline with a strawberry bavois and a strawberry coulis. And one of the criticisms by Paul and Prue for hers was actually, what on earth has she been doing for 4 hours? Because everyone else had loads of different types of things. There was jellies, there was coulis and bavois, and there was just lots of other elements and loads of flavour combinations. Whereas Maggie, she stuck with strawberry. She drew strawberries on the outside of the Joconde collar. And when Paul was like, well, what's your other element? She was like, oh yeah, a coulis. I'm like, okay. Doesn't really show a lot of skill, does it, I guess? So she shot herself in the foot having to make it twice, but then not necessarily doing enough. It was just one flavour and sort of two small elements.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, I suppose, just remember putting the strawberries on the outside, she didn't actually have a Paris skyline on her final piece because she had strawberries on the outside of it. But it was, again, one of those moments where Maggie missed the brief. And it was a weird brief this week. As we said, there were lots of different elements to it, but also it was very vague. But one of the things they said was having two substantial elements in the cake, and she just didn't. She wrote with a coulis. It's like, come on. It needs to be something set, not just... And she did literally just like splodge it on top. We saw that in the last minute. She just chucked it on there. So again, it was another one of those moments where Maggie doesn't quite listen to the brief and just goes her own way. So I wasn't surprised that it got the critique it got.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't substantial enough. A coulis isn't enough, is what I've learned from this. That's just an extra little bit. You need some more substantial dessert. So obviously you can tell, I'm sure you've watched the episode, because why would you be listening to this? But you can tell Maggie was going out from the beginning. As soon as she said, I don't even eat dessert, we knew that Maggie was going to be the one going out this week, because she'd had a few weeks of just not really doing very well. And if anyone presents a sticky toffee pudding like that in the Bake Off tent, they are definitely going out that week. So I think she was definitely the right person to go.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer this week, and it was a shame because we love Maggie. She's got a great personality. She was Prue 2 from week 1, and she's been really fun to have in the tent this year. But yeah, she kept not quite following the brief, and I don't know. I was getting a bit bored of the traditional classics, so I was quite glad in a way that it was her week. Having said that, say a lovely person, and it would be a shame not to have her laughter in the tent because she's so funny.
Absolutely. She's going to be a personality that I think everyone misses in the tent going forward.
Yeah.
So it is sad that she's gone, but she didn't just have the edge, she didn't have it like some of the others are actually a lot more creative. She was playing it safe. So, yep, sorry, Maggie, you played it safe for too long. But it does mean that people like Chigs are being given the chance to shine, and he was obviously star baker. Thoroughly deserved. It was nice, as you say earlier, to have someone that wasn't Jürgen and Giuseppe getting it. It was good to sort of see someone who is new to baking get it as well. So Chigs, I thought he was well deserved for star baker this week too.
Yeah, it was lovely, and it's very strange. We've had 3 male star bakers so far, no female star bakers. That's quite unusual, I think. But yeah, it was nice to see that, and it was a bit of a curveball. So I don't think if you'd have asked any of us at the end of episode 3 who would be getting star baker next, I don't think anyone would have said Chigs. He completely blew that out of the park. So he's going to be one to watch. I think he might go into my top 4 now. Ooh,
exciting! That's changing up a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely wouldn't have said last week that Chigs was going to be star baker. We were just going to say, it's Jürgen. It's always going to be Jürgen or Giuseppe. Again. And now this is something that we've talked about, how much of the show is prepared ahead of time to cater for the contestants. And I'm sorry, but as soon as we heard in the roundup at the end what next week's week is going to be, I was outraged. Next week they're doing German week.
Sorry, that's pronounced Jürgen Week. I cannot wait for Jürgen Week. Literally, as soon as that came, so I've been joking about Japanese Week again because we had Japan Week a couple of series back, and when they came up with German Week, I was like, you are kidding me, right? This is. I'm looking forward to Greek Cypriot Week coming up later on in the series. Obviously, we've had Italian Week. It was just very, very strange, but Well, do you know what? It's going to be tricky because if Jürgen doesn't get star baker next week, that's the pressure is on him to get that. He can only fail next week, really. That's going to be tough.
I know. I think Jürgen is probably so happy since his bread week sort of blip. I think he's going to be really happy that they've got a whole German week dedicated to the food that he's eaten growing up, and that he probably had started baking. They were his first sort of bakes. One that I can remember is they're doing Christmas cookies, which I thought was quite nice, or Christmas biscuits, and I'm not sure about the other two that they've got. They were sort of showing a lot of Jürgen telling everyone how to say different things in the German language. So it's going to be, I think, a Jürgen heavy week. But as you brought up Japanese Week, it did make me think, because there was a lot of criticism about Japanese Week last series. Even though I really liked it, I thought it was quite an interesting thing to do. I think they sort of said that it didn't reflect Japanese culture and was a bit weird. So I thought maybe they wanted to do international style challenges and international weeks, but didn't want the backlash of getting things completely wrong or being completely tone deaf. So actually they went with a few challenges like the focaccia and things, and having a German week, because actually they have people from those countries actually on the bake-off, so they're less likely to get it wrong, but then they're still able to explore international bakes.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, we've got it in October as well. There could be a nice Oktoberfest theme. We've got German Christmas market season coming up. There's lots of opportunity. It's a bit closer to home, so I think people can learn a bit more. And I'll have to dust off my GCSE German, I think, for next week.
Yeah, that'll be good. And we get some Glühwein. I've just remembered that from Christmas markets. I know. That's what we should come with next week. Glühwein. Yes. What else do they do that's really good? German market Christmas food.
Something.
Bratwurst.
Bratwurst, Lebkuchen, the sort of like gingerbread
that's what I
cake.
Couldn't remember.
Love a bit of Lebkuchen.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll come prepared next week. It's going to be very German.
Exactly. We're going to be thinking about German food and German biscuits and things up until German week begins next week. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much, JP, for joining me again here on In the Mix to talk all about the Great British Bake Off. I think it's been a good one, and I'm looking forward to Jürgen Week, as you put it, next week.
Good old Jürgen Week.